So I think I may have just watched my favorite super robot anime by far. By the way, I know a lot of you guys prefer fully edited non-facecam videos, but bear with me. I intend to use this video as a basis for a greater project down the line, and if you're a fan of super robots, you can probably guess what I'm getting at. Just be patient. Combattler V, or Super Electromagnetic Robot Combattler V, if you want to go by the full title, is a 1976 mecha anime directed by Tadao Nagahama. Nagahama is a name some folks who are familiar with classic anime may recognize, as he was a director for shows like Star of the Giants and Rose of Versailles, but more relevantly to today's subject, he directed the latter 24 episodes of 1975's Brave Riding, after Mobile Suit Gundam's very own Yoshiyuki Tomino had done the first 26. Riding is pretty important here, as it was essentially Nagahama's first time working on a mecha production, which he seemed to enjoy, as elements from that show would wound up in Combattler V, namely the titular robot being a transforming mecha, to which Riding may have been the first transforming robot in anime. I could be very wrong on that. Combattler V is also the first entry in Nagahama's Robot Romance trilogy, a series of mecha anime that heavily emphasize drama. These shows consist of Combattler V, Voltes 5, and Daimos in that order. The action and characters are very much intertwined with how the story progresses in these shows, and while I'm only part way through Voltes and I have not seen Daimos just yet, I have heard it gets even more so in those shows, as apparently Voltes 5 was the first ever serialized anime. I'll get into more of the influences the show has had on Japanese pop culture eventually, but for now, just know that this is probably and arguably the most influential set of anime to exist. Story goes that an alien race from the planet Campbell seeks other worlds to inhabit when Oriana and her army of beasts led by her son Garuda come across Earth with the goal to enslave humanity. The only ones who can stop the Campbellians are 5 young pilots, each of whom control one of 5 components that form Combattler V. Pilot of Unit 1, the Battle Jet, is the hot-blooded Hyoma Aoi. On the surface, he may look like your typical mecha protagonist, but he makes for an effective team leader who keeps everyone in check, though sometimes his emotions can get the best of him, making for a lead we can both connect with and root for. He also suffers a lot. In fact, a lot of bad shit happens in Combattler V. For Unit 2, the Battle Crusher, we have Juzo Naniwa. His more cool demeanor always finds itself clashing with Hyoma's leadership, but still proves to be a valuable asset to the team with how skillful he is as a marksman. He also may or may not be a flat earther. Unit 3, the Battle Tank, is Daisaku Nishikawa, one of the many rotund mecha gentlemen. His spirit as a fighter really helps keep the team together, almost in a way where they feel like family, which is very important for a show such as this. He's especially close to the pilot of Unit 5, who we'll get to in a bit. Piloting Unit 4, the Battle Marine, is Chizuru Nanbara, granddaughter of Dr. Nanbara, the creator of Combattler V. Chizuru especially stands out here. The show really goes out of its way to portray her as a tragic yet tenacious member of the battle team who has a handful of episodes dedicated to her like everyone else. It just goes to show that for a series whose main demographic was largely younger boys with all intents and purposes, they were willing to go above and beyond and connect with people outside those boundaries, which opens the gates to have something more universally appealing. And again, Chizuru isn't the only one with so much attention. Each character has a flaw that holds them back, which makes you root for them in the end. And lastly, Unit 5, the Battlecraft, is Kosuke Kita, the youngest of the group, but also a proven intellect, which proves to be very beneficial. By the way, Ropet is awesome, one of the coolest robot companions ever. I need Ropet in my life. To start things off, you know how they say first impressions are always important? Well, Combattler V gives a very strong and promising first impression. I don't think I've ever been so hooked upon the first episode of an anime like this. Right off the bat, you're bearing witness to unbelievably catastrophic damage that makes the villains feel like such a credible threat, while our heroes scramble desperately to come together before uniting as one. It sets the tone so well, it's straightforward and does not pull any punches. The show does follow a Monster of the Week format, which is not a bad thing at all, yet Combattler V manages to show signs of growth and development throughout its run, despite these limitations. The best example of this is the first half of the series. We see Garuda desperately try to earn his mother's approval, failure after failure, to the point where it really messes with his head. It's like if you took the Darth Vader and Palpatine dynamic and turned it into Norman and Harry Osborn. It's almost touching yet tragic how the show manages to humanize him and make him such a relatable villain. But it still reminds you that his evil comes from his own flaws, rooted in his vulnerabilities and insecurities, to which he's very oblivious of. Garuda is also part of what's honestly one of the most shocking plot twists I've ever seen in an anime. I won't spoil it, but all I'm going to say is that Hideaki Anno totally ripped it off for Evangelion. The first half of Combattler V comes off as a very effective series, with how it handles ideas pertaining to war, how devastating it can be, how it shapes people at their lowest, and what drives people to come together during times of hardship. Believe it or not, there are damaging ramifications that have long-term effects on the story. A big one involves Hyoma, whose arms get shot and he can no longer move them. So he ends up having to get a new set of augmented arms. And this is just early on in the show, by the way, so let that give you an idea as to what our heroes have to face later on. Though, unfortunately, Combattler V was considered a bit much in regards to its extreme content back in 1976. Parents complained about the show's dark tone and handling of its characters, so when you get halfway through the show, you feel like you're approaching the end game all of a sudden. While that is technically true, Nagahama and staff did need to wrap up their story prematurely, but it was still an impactful send-off for what it had to leave behind. In the anime's second half, we're introduced to a new cast of villains, another group of Kambalians who threaten the Earth, led by Empress Genera. Alongside her are, these are their actual names by the way, Warcomedes and Dangle. And rather than an ongoing dramatic plot, the second half opts for your more typical tokusatsu style of making a new plan every week to get rid of the good guys. But that's not to suggest the show ever gets bad. It's still highly entertaining, and Nagahama still finds ways to punch you in the gut when you least expect it. And thankfully, the show's final quarter feels a lot closer in spirit to what the first half has established. And of course, I gotta talk about the monsters. A lot of the designs for the slave beasts and the magma beasts come off as being colorful and bizarre, but with the way the show builds them up as these terrifying weapons of mass destruction, you can't help but find yourself enamored with how unique each of them are and how they pose a new challenge for a Combattler every time. They also recycle a lot of Toho, Daiei, and Tsuburaya creature sounds. I swear there's like 5 different monsters that have the same roar as Godzilla. And the fights themselves are done rather superbly, as they feel like ones you'd see in Ultraman in spirit, and they can get real tense as the Combattler team needs to cooperate as a single functional unit, and each monster is different. There's lots to say about Combattler V that makes it such a great show. And like with the other 2 entries in the Robot Romance trilogy, it's highly influential in how it helped spearhead a whole generation of Japanese entertainment. I've been trying really hard to not draw any parallels with Super Sentai until now, because as much as I want to say the show feels like an animated Super Sentai, Combattler would actually inspire the series to pull from several of its conventions and tropes, like color-coded uniforms, the villains having drama of their own, and most importantly, the robots. Yeah, if it weren't for Robot Romance, Super Sentai would not have giant robots. Yes, that means Spider-Man wouldn't have had Leopardon. Speaking of which, some of my viewers who've been around longer than I have may recall Combattler V from Marvel's Shogun Warriors comics, where it was called Combatra. Additionally, while Combattler may have not been the first combiner robot or one that transforms, it did push the idea of making them more toyetic with how each unit functioned individually and how they were colored and designed, on top of the play pattern that they brought with them. All in all, Combattler V is awesome. Thankfully, like with the other entries in the Robot Romance trilogy, the series is available on Blu-ray. So if you're a fan of giant robots going to war with an ancient empire out to conquer the Earth, you'll love Titania's Book 1 Rise of the Titans hardcover edition is out now, and ironically enough, you'll find a handful of parallels between this and Combattler V, which is crazy because I've worked on the treatment for Titania's for like 2 years before ever watching this show. And many can attest to that, by the way. I guess it really just goes to show how influential this anime is if I'm accidentally borrowing ideas from it, but seriously, check out Combattler V if you haven't. That's going to be it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys for watching. Want to shout out my channel members and my supporters on Patreon if you like what you see and want to get early access to videos and exclusive content. Click the link below. Other than that, feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see y'all next time. Take it easy, everyone.